Continuing a series about tools I like to use or prefer to use that do not come installed by default in Kali Linux. This video will cover CrackMapExec. According to the GitHub page here, it's a Swiss Army knife for pen testing networks. But where it really shines is when you're pen testing an Active Directory network and you have credentials or even password hashes, being able to spray those credentials around the network and find out where you have local admin access. Let's say, for example, you get a user's credentials and maybe on one particular system they're not a local administrator, but there may be some other systems on the domain where they're a local admin, and you need to find out where that is. And it also contains modules where you could run and execute code on those systems. Everything from running Mimikatz and dumping plaintext credentials from memory to uploading and downloading files, gathering information, executing commands remotely, etc. So let's walk through that. Now first, for the installation. So really in Kali, let's take a look and see. Okay, so it can be as simple as apt install CrackMapExec. However, that's going to get you a little bit older version, like the stable version, which is fine. But the dev version, which we'll have to install manually, has more features and is more up to date. I prefer to install that one. It may also have bugs, but it also has a lot of useful modules I like to use. So installation. Okay, so now that it's installed, we don't have to go back to that op folder. We can run CrackMapExec. So see if we can fix this. See if we can upgrade it. Okay, So that fixed it. Just did pip install uppercase U to update ASN 1 crypto. Could break something else. It is preferable to install Python projects such as this using something like pipenv or virtual environments. So on first run, it's initialized everything. So now let's get familiar with it. We can see down here that it has different protocols available. The one I use most often is SMB, but in some cases WinRM or MS Microsoft SQL Server may be preferable. For example, on a pen test, you may get SA database credentials, and you can spray those, see where they have access. You can run modules on those SQL servers. Or maybe you have domain credentials, like for example, domain administrator or service account. You can spray that across SQL servers, Microsoft SQL servers that is, and execute commands or find out where you have privileges to execute commands or remote code. So anyway, digging a little deeper, one thing I do want to cover before I forget is CME-DB. Once you've been running CME or CrackMapExec for a while, it's going to be adding things to the database, and you can access that information here. At this point, we haven't really populated the database because we haven't done anything. But for example, you can look at creds that you've gathered. You could look at hosts and see which hosts that you own, etc. Just wanted to leave that out there. Also, cd-cme, the .cme folder, your cme.conf file, your config file. You can change things about it, like if you want to say something other than pwned, which we'll see in just a minute. Change some of the basic configuration here. All right, so most common usage is going to be something like CME, the protocol, and then either the IP address, host name, or network. So in this case, my Active Directory lab is on 192.168.38.0/24. Now we can do basic fingerprinting just running this. So it's still trying to finish that /24, but this is all it's going to find. It only has 3 Windows hosts on there. So you can see the operating system version, you can see the name of the system, the domain, whether or not SMB signing is required, if SMB version 1 is enabled. So what else can we do with it? What I most commonly do with it is if I compromise some credentials and I want to spray those across the network to find out where I have local admin access. So I'm using Chris Long's, I think his name is Chris, it's C Long on GitHub, detection lab. It's an Active Directory lab. And it has, by default, a local account called Vagrant with a password of Vagrant. And there's also an Active Directory account with should be the same credentials. So I'm going to do CME SMB protocol. Actually, I can just up arrow, can't I? And I'm going to do, now if you're doing local credentials or local account password hashes, you want to do local-auth. Otherwise, it'll try and connect to the domain. And -u password. Okay. So we can see that it's a local administrator here. Now let's see what else we can do. We're local administrator there. What can we do with this? So let's see, share sessions, disks. Let's go up a little bit. SAM. We could dump SAM hashes. Since that account was an administrator on the domain controller, we can dump the NTDS. We can list shares, sessions, disks, logged on users, groups, password policy. We can spider shares, get and put files. So let's do, what was that command again? Passpal. We might want to run this to find out what the domain password policy is before we do any password spraying. Now let's do SAM, dump SAM hashes. You can see it added 3 SAM hashes to the database. So now let's try some different credentials. I have added a user, DOM user, and it's an administrator, I believe, on the Windows 10 system. Okay, we can see that this hash looks the same. It pretty much, the local admin hash, D35, is the same across both of these systems. And we've also got the Vagrant account on here. So now let's take a look at CMEDB now that we've populated that database a bit. Okay, so these are the creds that we've gained. So these cred IDs on the left, remember that. So let's do -ID. Instead of now that we have some creds, or actually some password hashes, we can spray those hashes instead of the we don't actually have to know the password. We can just use the hash, and instead of specifying -U and -P for username and password, we can just specify the ID. So let's do that again with cred ID 5. Okay, so going back to the CMEDB, we can see that we have admin creds on these two boxes. So now let's look at the modules. We have, let me find that here in the help. Oh, when you're getting SAM hashes, also go after LSA. LSA secrets can frequently provide usable passwords in plain text. Normally you'll get hashes, but you can also get some plain text secrets from that as well. So don't overlook that. In addition to spraying for SAM, I would also use a LSA option. And of course, we have domain admin, as we saw earlier, so we could use this and dump all of the domain's password hashes. What I'm looking for at the moment is -L for listing modules, and then -O for module options. So it's capital L and lowercase o. And then to run a module, it's going to be capital M. You can also add the -O to find those module options. So let's take a look at that now. So these are the ones that we can do. Let's see. LSASI. -M for module, LSASI, -O for module options. Oop. Is it options? So this is a very useful module. I don't have it prepared in advance, so I won't do it on this video, but you should definitely know about it. And the reason why, even though we have a Mimikatz module, which in theory should help you dump all plain text password hashes and or plain text passwords and password hashes from memory, it's frequently blocked by antivirus, including Windows Defender. However, procdump is a signed binary from Microsoft, and you can always upload that manually and use that to dump LSAS process memory to a file, copy that offline, and then run it through Mimikatz on a system that you own, which has antivirus or Defender disabled. However, this module automates that, but you do have to download procdump first from Microsoft and specify the path here. So basically, this module will automate that whole process of uploading procdump, dumping LSAS memory to a file, downloading it, and then parsing it for plain text credentials as well as password hashes. And I used to do this that very manual way, which I already mentioned about uploading procdump, etc. But it was very tedious. You had to do one host at a time. This will automate it across a whole network or a whole domain. You can also do things like run the Bloodhound ingester, so that you can look for for domain privilege escalation. So very useful module. Let's see, what else do we have here? I'm not going to cover all of these. I always run GPP auto login to search the domain controller for auto login credentials. GPP password, which this is getting more and more rare to find, but when it does, it'll give you local admin credentials on domain systems. Interpreter inject. Mimikittens will also download or parse systems for credentials. P inject DLL or executable into memory. Scuffy module. I like this. I'll use this to plant SCF files on network shares. And when a user browses that share in Windows Explorer, Windows Explorer by default, they don't even have to see that file. They don't have to click on it. But if it's on that share that they're browsing at the root of the share, it will send you password hashes. I've used the shellcode inject before. Slinky here works a lot like the Scuffy module. Enumerate tokens in memory. Newer systems like Windows 10, Server 2012, 2016, etc. They don't have wdigest credentials in plain text and memory by default anymore. However, you can use this module to re-enable that, and then after you re-enable it, as people log onto the system after that, it will start storing plain text credentials. So some very useful modules here. This is one of those tools for me on an internal network pen test. It's a must-have. Now, even though the CMEDB, the database part of the program, is very good, I can tell you that me and a lot of other pen testers I know will also, when we run a command, we'll, for example, we'll tee this out to cme.log. Actually t-a for append, so we can keep appending to the same file. cme.log. Because the CMEDB has some limitations on the way it displays data, and you're really after the end of an assessment, when you're going back and doing the reporting, you're really going to want to be able to parse all the data from this, and eventually it's going to all scroll by. So teeing this out to a log file is great. So eventually, if you have t-a for append, after multiple sessions using CrackMapExec, you can parse on which systems you've pwned, and then grep out the IP addresses. You can grep out the SAM hashes, etc. It just gives you more flexibility than what CMEDB has alone. That's all for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it.